The NFL hasn't exactly been at the forefront of social issues in years past, but now it seems they're taking a stand on the issue of bathroom bills targeting transgender people with some very interesting timing. You see, just days after holding Super Bowl 51 in Houston, the league issued this thinly veiled warning to the state of Texas, which is considering a bill requiring transgender people to use bathrooms corresponding to the sex on their birth certificate. The NFL embraces inclusiveness. We want all fans to feel welcomed at our events, and NFL policies prohibit discrimination based on age, gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, or any other improper standard. If a proposal that is discriminatory or inconsistent with our values were to become law there, that would certainly be a factor considered when thinking about awarding future events. So, for the NFL, why now? Did the NFL want to wait until the hundreds of millions of dollars from the Super Bowl rolled in before taking on Texas? The league did talk before the Super Bowl of the importance of inclusiveness, but this is different. This is a Texas-style stare-down, like something out of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it could get uglier. You see, the Texas bill is backed by the state's Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, not that Dan Patrick, who cited Super Bowl 51 as evidence that big events like the Super Bowls won't go anywhere. And the state's governor, Greg Abbott, responded to the NFL with this tweet. NFL decision makers also benched Tom Brady last season. It ended with the NFL handing the Super Bowl trophy to Brady. How's that for calling a bluff? The Texas law is similar to North Carolina law HB 2. That's the law that prompted the NBA to pull this weekend's All-Star game from the state to New Orleans. And according to Forbes, that move costing the region $100 million. The NCAA removed 7 championships from the state this season, including 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. Estimated impact in the 9 figures. But the Super Bowl is the coup de grace. Houston made an estimated $350 million on the game. And while the next 4 Super Bowls aren't scheduled in Texas, if this bill passes, could Houston have been their last big game? Not only that, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones said he wants to host the draft in Texas. Could that be in jeopardy? The state of Texas has a lot at stake, so who's going to blink first? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by ESPN NFL business analyst Andrew Brandt and ESPN senior editor Christina Carl, who is transgender. Welcome to both of you. Okay, Andrew, the big question, why now? They could have talked about this last week or before, but Super Bowl was going on then. Now the crowds are gone. Why now?
Yes, the crowds are gone, Ryan. It does seem strategic, and the NFL can appear inclusive, politically correct, and certainly sensitive to LGBT issues by announcing now, after the cameras have moved out, after all the businesses moved out of Houston, the Super Bowl's over, to do that. But even doing that, Ryan, we can't be too cynical here. The NFL has put a stake in the ground here. They've taken a position on something going forward. So if we see other issues, and we'll talk about future events that could come to Texas. And, of course, 2 teams, the Texans and the Cowboys, are based there. They're going to have events coming up. So, yes, it's strategic, it's sensitive, but they have it after the millions and millions of dollars have moved out. No more Super Bowls scheduled for Texas. We'll see where it goes. But they have made a stake in the ground. They've taken a position on this issue. All
right, the NFL being strategic. Imagine that. Well, Christina, let me ask you this. If the law passes, could what happened or could what has happened in North Carolina happen in Texas in terms of different leagues pulling these events, costing the state, hundreds of millions of dollars?
Oh, absolutely. I think the question here is one of how much Texas stands to lose if potentially premium sports events get moved. I mean, estimates range upwards towards $8.5 billion, which, that's an awful lot of penalty to have to pay for trying to make a point in a piece of legislation that may not even be found constitutional. So it's a really, interesting game of chicken that the state is playing, but the NFL has taken this position before. So when you go back to Super Bowl 49 and the fact that they opposed and took a very strong public stance against SB 1062 in Arizona and threatened to move that after already living up to the precedent that they made with Super Bowl 27, going back when, Arizona did not adopt Martin Luther King Day and they moved the Super Bowl then. So in a sense, this might seem like sudden and new, but I think it's actually living up to the NFL's established traditions of, taking a strong position on civil rights issues.
$8.5 billion when you think about that, I wonder. But then, Christina, I have to ask you, there's a big financial impact in North Carolina, but that law still stands. Could Texas very well take the same position?
They could, but again, this is where the Gavin Grimm case that's about to be heard by the Supreme Court in March may end up being something that makes SB 6 besides the point and makes this kind of bickering between the two besides the point, because the Supreme Court ends up ruling that laws like SB 6 are effectively unconstitutional, then Texas can pass it, but then it's against the law anyways. So at that point, we'd see what the league decides to do with federal law kind of overruling like state law. But we'll just have to see. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting game of chicken.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned exactly what I'm going to ask Andrew about, a game of chicken. Andrew, this is Jerry Jones country. We all know how powerful he is within the league. If he wants the draft there, do you think that the NFL, even if this is still pending, let's say it's still pending, do you think the NFL is going to say, no way, get rid of that law, Texas?
Yeah, now we're talking about the owner versus league dynamic. I mean, when we talk about Roger Goodell so much, Ryan, we have to understand, and we do understand, who he works for. He works for the 32 owners. They have the power in this situation. And if we're talking about a future draft, future events, it's going to be an ownership issue as much as a league issue. If Jerry Jones, as you said, wants something to happen, Robert McNair wants something to happen, maybe they move along. And again, look at the timing. Just after the Super Bowl, not just the Super Bowl, in December, we covered meetings the NFL had in, guess where? Dallas. 7 months ago, we covered meetings where they awarded the Rams to L.A. That was in, guess where? Houston. So a lot of events have recently just happened in Texas. It doesn't mean they're not scheduling anything for a while, but we don't know. If you talk about draft next year, if you talk about all these fan fest things could be coming up for the offseason workouts, OTAs, mini camps, etc., we'll see where the owners stand. If you're asking me between the NFL and Jerry Jones or Robert McNair, I'm picking the owners. They went out.
Oh, okay. And Christina, I have to ask you this. Has any other league had trouble with this? Has anybody taken any action yet? I mean, the NCAA took such quick action in North Carolina.
Well, yes, and I think this is something where, like, again, when the Equal Rights Ordinance was overturned in Houston, we immediately at the same time saw, like, Houston lose out on its bid for the 2018, 19, and 2020 college football championship games. So, like, that's already had an impact. The NCAA may end up choosing to move, like, the Final Four in 2018 in San Antonio because of this event. And, again, the NCAA has taken a very strong position against these kinds of laws. So, and I would go back to, like, the NFL team owners. When you look at, like, the Patriots owner, like, took a strong position on Massachusetts legislation that, like, was in favor of integration of trans kids in public schools. So, this is where I would say, the owners may well have the vote, but the owners may be on the same side as the commissioner on this particular issue.
And Andrew, this brings up an important point when you think about it. I mean, we like to think that, if the Super Bowl's not going to be there, or if the NCAA tournament's not going to be there, they're definitely going to do away with the law. But that hasn't happened in North Carolina. So when you're talking about ownership, how much does an issue like that, the social, moral aspect of it, weigh in on them, as opposed to, well, I'm afraid of what the public's going to say to me if I hold the game there, or the money aspect?
You're talking about power all different sides here. You have power of the league and Roger Goodell, maybe the most important commissioner. You have power of the state, the governor, and all the people involved there, and then the ownership. And as was just said, we don't know the position of Jerry Jones or Robert McNair. We may hear about that soon. But we're going to find out this sort of power trio, the triumvirate, and where it stands, because if owners line up behind the governor, that's a problem for the NFL. They have to get all on the same page here. We're going to watch this play out.
Yeah, thorny issue indeed. We're going to see who's going to blink first. Christine, Andrew, thank you so much.